if you're an entrepreneur, you're in the top 5% of the population. 85% of the population don't want to do what you're doing, right? And so just keep doing it. It's all about building relationships, and it's having a longer term view that you're not just going to go there on day one and do a deal. The number one thing is to have a shareholders agreement. The next thing is make sure you update them at any major change of the business's life cycle.
What one key piece of advice would you like to give to all the entrepreneurs watching and listening today?
Go for it. At the end of the day, you'll probably be disappointed by what you didn't do than what you do.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Business Growth Show. I'm your host, Athin Cassiotis, and today I have an awesome guest. His name is Stephen Petith. He is an advisor, investor, and Oceania. And Stephen owns several companies that help families and businesses in wealth optimization and protection and business services. And Stephen is a partner in several investment holding companies in transportation, housing, energy, and manufacturing. And he's also the driving force behind the sovereign capitalist community and the social enterprise Wonder Below. Welcome, Stephen, and thank you for being on the Business Growth Show.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, definitely, mate. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing show for everyone watching and listening today. And you are a successful entrepreneur. So for those people who don't know who you are, introduce yourself by telling us more about you and your journey.
Yeah. So, look, I grew up in North Queensland, in Australia, and then early on went and joined the Navy as an apprentice and spent 10 years in the Australian Navy. After that, come out, I was an electronics technician during the Navy, my Navy years. Come out, joined the family business, which was manufacturing door locks and hinges, and moved to Asia and run manufacturing businesses for the family and for myself up in Asia in the hardware sector, and did that right the way through to 2007. Around the time of the GFC, we sold that enterprise to an American group. We shut down the Australian enterprise at the same time, and then we basically, as a family, mum and dad retired, and I went off and sort of were doing private equity work for high net worth individuals in Asia. So we were doing everything from buying businesses in Europe, the US, property deals in Malta, and other jurisdictions around Asia. And at the same time, I started my charitable works, which was doing ocean research and collecting ghost nets in the ocean at the same time, which I've always had a strong connection with the ocean, and always wanted to make sure that the oceans were protected. And our family animal is a turtle, so we've got a very strong connection with the ocean. And so I've been doing that sort of ever since. And since I come back to Australia around COVID time, started building my own investment companies, and was part of a PE firm here for a while. Then went out more on my own and are building businesses in transportation, mainly focusing on three areas now, and that's sustainable housing and the whole housing infrastructure. So everything from property development, property management, building, developing systems to do with housing, solar, wind, battery storage, framing systems. Like this morning, I was just at a company I'm looking at buying, which is a modular housing business, and so forth. And the other one then is making sure that we've got a clean food movement. So it's one of the new ones that I'm moving into, working with several people that you're familiar with and I'm familiar with, about linking farms and food production. So basically going farmer to plate. So as of today, they're sort of my two big ones, and still have interest in energy stuff in the US, and that as well. So.
Yeah, awesome, mate. What an amazing story, and yeah, how you've changed and then capitalized, and yeah, and also giving
Mm.
back as well, which is amazing. In that
Yeah,
area there, I think the interesting part is moving to Asia, right, and doing
yeah,
business there, because I think a lot of people, whether it's manufacturing, especially, of course, or just generally, it's a big market there. Um, what would you say to people if they want to do business? And I understand that obviously each country is a little bit different, of course, of the customs and things like that. But what should they be thinking about before maybe going to a meeting there, or looking at creating a partnership or something, for doing business here?
Yeah. So one of the things that I tell a lot of people, especially Australian businessmen, is when you're looking at Australia, Australia is 2% of the world's GDP, and I'm being very generous there. We're probably closer to 1% if you take mining and agriculture out of our gross domestic product. So that means there's 98% of the world's business is actually done outside of Australia, right? So Australia is very small on the world stage. So what most Australians think of when they're going overseas is that we matter, right? And pretty much we don't. We are so small. Most companies that you'll start to do business with overseas, we really don't matter, especially when it comes to manufacturing, because we don't buy enough. Our market is 25 million people. We're such a small GDP. So we most Australians think we're large fish in our current pond, but when we go overseas, we're small fish, right? So then we've got to get our head around that. The other thing is don't try and conquer one whole region at once. Um, for instance, in Asia, pick one area that's easy to go into. You might pick, for instance, Singapore, Malaysia, and look at that market rather than trying to go, well, I'm just going to sell to everything, because they're all different and cultures are different. The other thing is Australians are pretty good at traveling, and most of us have travelled, so we've seen the touristy side of things. But business is done differently. Relationships really matter, and for most of my time, especially being based in Hong Kong and dealing in southern China and Vietnam and so forth, Taiwan, it's all about building relationships, and it's having a longer term view that you're not just going to go there on day one and do a deal. It might take 6 trips, right? And the other side of the thing is go with what you want to achieve, right? Because it's so easy to go there and just get like a big fire hose of everything coming to you. An example is people go to the Canton Fair in Guangzhou, and it's pretty much, if you've never ever been, there is 30 odd exhibition halls with everything that you ever want, and it goes for a month, right? So you think, probably the biggest exhibition hall that we've got in Australia is, in Sydney. Um, think of 30 of those, right? And that's one exhibition. So there is everything you want, and you can get overwhelmed. So really focus in. The other thing is build relationships with expats that are up there. They can help you cut corners really, really easy. So join one of the like the Australian Hong Kong Chamber of Business, or something like that, and use that.
Yeah, awesome, mate. A lot of great stuff there with
Yeah.
focus, in Asia, big place, and get in there, build the relationships, of course, very important in business. Reminds me a little bit of the Nike story, how he went
Yeah.
in there and did all of
Yeah.
that, into Japan, and obviously started that with the Tigers and everything. And then how it, became Nike later, and he had to go there and do all of that to
Mm.
understand how it worked in those countries. So yeah, amazing with all those points, and this obviously flows well into what you do a lot of the time, which is internationalization, right?
Organizations. Yeah.
Yes. So going international, taking it beyond business borders, and I know you do this for big people like family offices, high net worth individuals, global investors, things like that. So if whether it's in Australia or other countries, and they're looking at going international, where do you think we should be starting there, and what's the benefits, I guess, of going? Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much every skill that is in Australia at the moment, I see can be leveraged overseas. There's so many places to start, but if you just look in the areas that I'm focused in manufacturing and that sort of stuff, um, we just don't have the ability here in Australia to open factories quick enough, right? To get a factory open in Australia, especially if it's involves processes that take environmental laws or lots of energy and all that sort of stuff. The ability to get that done and approved might take 3 to 5 years. but you could form a partnership with a current factory already in Vietnam or China or India or Malaysia that's doing whatever you need done, and then building the relationship with them, and that can start immediately, right? So you can actually move your time to market and make it shorter. The the other thing is if you've got a product here or you've got a service here that you want to go and establish over there, Australians are well regarded in Asia. Our food, for instance, is well regarded. Our building systems are well regarded. Um, our service industry is well regarded. Our education is well regarded up there. Plumbers. I've worked with guys that have had plumbing businesses, and we've gone and established training organizations with them in Vietnam to help train local plumbers and increase the sanitation in areas. And we've done that whether in basically using a for-profit and a not-for-profit approach, right? And by doing that, you get the best of both worlds. The other thing is relocating your entire operation. Um, I've got guys I'm working with a current family at the moment that are in air freight logistics, and they just want to totally move their entire operations. I'll keep an Australian operation, but they want to get to an X amount of size and they know they need to be international. So we're looking at relocating their entire operation, headquartering in Singapore, which is basically one of the largest transport hubs in Asia. And then also looking at southern China for them as well. But our first move is into Singapore, re-establishing them up there, getting them visas and actually moving their whole family and everything up there. So you've got the opportunity of relocating and re-establishing a business or growing your business out. The biggest thing again is have your plan, know what you want to achieve, and then move with it, or otherwise you can get sidetracked very easily.
Yeah, love it, mate. Very, very powerful. And one thing that comes to mind here that I know I've looked into, I think it's important for people is around like structuring, right? And where you're actually
Yep.
locating. So if you want to go internationally, you've got US, you've got certain different markets in Asia, you've got the UAE type of thing. Like these are options, right? From where you actually move the business or
Yeah.
change head office and things like that. So you want to maybe share about what we should be thinking about and maybe, what could be best for us depending on our situation. Yeah.
Yeah. So depending on your situation, and this is all just really general, not knowing the individual business, but some of the things you need to look at is if you're very customer facing. For instance, I work with a group and we're relocating their entire operations because they're basically selling a digital product, right? And their main audience was the US. So we've set them up in Asia because they get their product is from Asia and then it's sold mainly in the US. So we've set them up in Kuala Lumpur and they restructured up there. They moved under the My Second Home originally, but then got an investor visa. Have done a partnership with a local university to help them with R&D, and we've structured their actual operating business out of Singapore, right? Because Singapore is a territorial taxation, so you've got a great taxation thing. But not only that, Singapore love tech businesses. There is a lot of uh, support from government and other non-government universities and like in Singapore to support tech. We also then leveraged the entry into the US using Nevada, for instance. Once again, it's a no sales tax. It's a well-known jurisdiction, easy to get to from Asia, and then they can branch out and do the whole US. They're now looking at Europe, so we're looking at entry points into Europe. Europe being 27 different countries, you've got 27 different jurisdictions to leverage. And one of the good places to leverage for especially a digital product is somewhere like Estonia. You can set yourself up in Estonia and then go from there, and then you've got access to all the EU, right? And that's really good. The UAE is a very popular place for relocating to at the moment, especially for service personnel. But even people who are manufacturing, the UAE is building, well, not just the UAE, you got everywhere from Turkey, Egypt, the UAE, Saudi Arabia is putting in manufacturing capabilities and that as well. The UAE has a lot of expansion possibilities. So if you're in the medical field, guys doing implants and that sort of stuff, the UAE is a very, very attractive market for them, because inside that sort of 4 hour radius, you're looking at 8 to 900 million people, right? So you've got a lot bigger market to sell to. And but it all comes with tricks, and you need to know the right vehicles, the right people on the ground, having the right things. One of the biggest things never to do in this field is make it a tax-driven approach. Look, you can do, and if you do it right, you can get very, very good tax advantages from relocating your family office, for instance, or your family holding company, or the holding company that you're building your nest egg through. But it should never be the number one reason. The number one reason should always be to grow wealth and to grow business. Right? That should be your number one thing. Grow revenue.
Yeah, amazing, mate. Love all that comments there. So it's everyone to think about, and obviously, you've got some potential here of what Stephen said, and obviously you can chat to Stephen, right, if you want to do that, because I definitely recommend, like Stephen said, it depends on the situation, depends on the type of business, the industry, what markets, and that's where you're looking at where you do it, and knowing all those jurisdictions as well, which is important. So
and different life cycles. You might be selling your business and want to retire, so you want a different retirement life. You might be expanding your business internationally, so you need a different strategy for that. You might just want to sell out to someone in Asia or someone in America, so to a bigger player, to a private equity firm or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. And let's talk a bit more about private equity, because I think this is a big one, right? Because, getting investment into a business is massive,
Yeah,
right? Like to whether it's exit or just expand, right? In that way there to move forward. And I think a lot of people don't understand like that business has to be at a particular level, or have be looking
yeah.
enticing, let's call it, for private equity to be able to go, yeah, we'll give you our money. So what are they looking for, in terms of whether it's like how profitable the business is, or the types of businesses, things like that, with so that we're thinking about what do we need to hit, to get to that point. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of businesses, especially Australian businesses that are family run, are really too small for private equity, right? So there you're going to be looking for um, uh, sort of the VC money, but the scale up money. So if you're running a business, you're under $1 million a year in turnover, so you've probably got $200,000, 250 in EBIT or in net profit bottom terms. You're sort of going to be still too small for a lot of the bigger PE firms. But there's a lot of players out there, like family offices now, that are looking for those businesses. So you can tailor who you're looking for. There's a growing trend in the PE world that are now looking for micro enterprises that they can roll 6 or 7 of them together and then scale them, right? Where it used to be people would come along, like myself or other investors, and go, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to roll these 250, $500,000 a year business together. I'm going to roll 6 of them together, going to get them to $3 million net profit, and then I'll sell them on to the next guy, right? Well, now the private equity firms are starting to set up sub firms that are looking to do that themselves. So basically, what they'll do is they'll package 5, 6, 7 businesses together, get them up to a 3 to 5 million EBIT or net profit figure, and then sell them to the main firm. And then what they will do is they will take 5 or 6 of those rolled up entities and then create a larger entity, and then they will then on sell it into the public markets or into a larger firm. So private equity is banded as well, and different private equity firms have different targets of where they want people to be. So if you're looking at it, what you need to have is your business needs to run without you. That's number one, especially if you're not going to stay in and do an earn out process of the sale. Two, it needs to be have some sort of moat or be in a area that's not easily copied and raped and pillaged by someone new. has to be some upside for the guys coming in that needs to have good systems and processes in place, and you also need to be basically open to expansion, right? Especially if you're going to take private equity money and stay. If you're selling out, they don't care. So sometimes they'll want you to stay, and sometimes they'll replace you with a full CEO, depending on where you are in the band and that. So make sure, and also don't load your business up with all your family expenses. Right. One of the things I see all the time, and I went and had a look at a business probably 3, 4 weeks ago, sat down with a guy, I was looking at his numbers going, gee, your net profit's low, everything's low. And then I started to dig in a bit deeper and I went, uh, the son's car's in here, the wife's car's in here, the family holidays in here, everything is being booked. Oh, the renovation for the home, was put through the business. That there was everything was loaded up that made the numbers, the top line number was good, but the bottom line number was terrible. And it just didn't make any sense. But when we started to strip all that out, all of a sudden we could see that there was a good business there. One of the other things that a lot of private equity firms don't like is a family business that's stacked with a family. Right. And when I say that is, mum does the accounts, dad's on the tools, the two kids are working in the business as well, the uncle's in there, because when it sells, most of those are all going to leave. There's no loyalty for them to stay with the business. So having a proper structured business, when not just, is it a proprietary limited or whatever, but is it also structured with the right HR, the right personnel to make it operate on its own. The next big one that they're looking for is the right structure that they can purchase, right? I and some other people that I work with, we actually like to buy the companies, so the shares of the company rather than the assets of the company. Now, and to do that, the company needs to be structured in a way that we can do that, right? And the reason that we do that is 9 times out of 10, we won't change how the company operates. Sometimes we will. We'll get in there and change. And normally, whenever we've gone in and changed the way the company operates too quick, too soon, it's normally led to failure, right? Because we're getting in and changing. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make when they buy a business is they buy it and then change its name. Why would you do that? It just makes no sense to me. The other reason that we also like to buy the company is that 9 times out of 10, you won't have to change any of the supplier or any of your customer contracts because they're contracting with the business, they're not contracting with the shareholder, right? So, for instance, if I'm a private equity firm coming in to buy your business, I've already got 6 businesses in your field in my portfolio. I'm just going to buy you and add you on, right? And just let you run without interfering with you. I might help with back end admin and all that sort of stuff, strip some of that out because you don't need 6 HR departments and you don't need 6, marketing teams unless there is difference in it. So you can actually streamline that way. But normally it's just going to stay as an operating business. So it needs to be structured right. It needs to have the right personnel, the systems, processes, and so on. So having that as a foundation, then you sort of know, well, what do I need? Am I exiting? All right. So if I'm exiting, I'm looking for a particular private equity firm. If I'm looking to scale up, so I'm actually on the journey for mergers and acquisitions. So I need probably a strategic pool of money, right? Someone that's going to come in, take 20, 30% of the business, or set up a new holding company that you'll roll into, and then they'll provide the acquisition capital and stuff to come along. So it's knowing what you need it for. Most people think that they need private equity backing when really what they want is structured finance to grow their business, right? So they actually need to know what type of finance or what type of equity that they're after.
Yeah, amazing. A lot of gold that Stephen just shared there, right? And It's interesting about what you said about, what you buy, like the share sale, the asset sale, there. And because I hear people say, oh, um, you know, it's that thing between contracts, like you said,
Mhm.
if the contracts are there and they're not assignable to something else, then you really need to buy the company.
Yeah,
But then I guess the potential risk there, and I'd like to know your take on this, is about the liabilities, right? Like what's
yeah.
the liabilities on the company? Because you also take on that. So what happens there if there's, apart from maybe loans to the shareholders or whatever like that, if it's the owners, shareholder, that could probably be negotiated. But what happens on the liability side there with everything? Is that a negotiation that comes into the final amount and things like that? If there's something on there on the balance
Yeah.
sheet?
So
Yeah.
you do balance sheet adjustments, right? So if there's family loans and all that sort of stuff, and so you've got uh, hire purchase for equipment and all that sort of stuff, well, that's just adjusted in the price. So when you're doing your balance sheet adjustments and coming up with your price, you're actually taking liabilities away, and you might have forward contracts. So you might actually engineer that part of the purchase price is part of that forward contract, and it's going to get paid out over a certain period of time. You might be looking at, say, paying cash for 50% of the business, and then vendor finance slash earn out for the other 50%. So there's the performance of the business is going. Contracts will have a lot of warranties in them, a lot of legal warranties when we're taking on the business, that the directors are responsible for everything up until the day that we are, and they're still on the hook for 3 to 5 years afterwards for anything that happened prior to that. So we do handcuff to some point the previous owners to their actions as directors of the company. Um, so
Yeah. Awesome, man. Now that's really powerful to know and for everyone to be aware of, right? These are the really key things, right? Because all these little terms and all this sort of stuff, it could be make it or break it sometimes of doing a good deal, right? If you don't know what you're
yeah,
doing there. So you get the right people on board. Let's talk a bit more about family offices. You talked about them just
yep,
before, because I think maybe we can do it from both sides, right? Like, obviously for people that don't know, obviously if you've got a decent amount of money in your family,
mhm,
you can create a family office, right?
obviously, yep,
There, and that might be from an exit or just building up wealth.
mhm,
On that side of what's involved, like to I guess if you wanted to create it in a simple
mhm,
way, and then maybe like what are they looking for as well, like in part of it to get involved, with family offices on the other
yeah.
side.
Yeah. So family offices used to be the domains of very, very wealthy, 50, $100 million net liquid sort of net worth families. Today, it's getting a lot less. There's a lot of firms around that can help you restructure your family office if you've got anywhere between $1 million and $5 million. You've had an exit from a business, and you just want to make sure that wealth is going to last several generations, and then there's firms set up to do that. So think of a family office as a management firm for the family, right? And family offices, one of a good friend of mine who works in this space, he goes, once you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office, right? Because every single one of them's different. And there's people, when they go to look for investment from family offices, nearly will only deal with the investment management side, right? So you're actually only dealing with one very small part of the family office, and it's the portfolio managers normally that are employed to deploy the family's capital to make money, right? And families will have criteria of what they're looking for. And this is where you need to do your homework, right? So you can quite easily find family office lists, and especially on LinkedIn and that sort of stuff, you can scrape the details from, and then go and have a look. Some families might only do real estate, some might only do technology, some might do space, some might do startups, some might only do late stage companies. For instance, you wouldn't go to Berkshire Hathaway, you wouldn't go to Warren Buffett to sell him a startup because he's not interested, right? He's going to take companies that have got, 20, 30, 40 years track records of dividends and profits and so forth. You wouldn't go to someone like Mark Cuban with a late stage buyout business. You'd go to him with a startup style venture because that's what he does. You wouldn't go to Carl Icahn for anything other than basically a turnaround. Right. So you need to pick the people you're going to. Australia, the top 20, 30 wealthiest people in Australia, pretty much most of them all have family offices and are focused on certain areas. For instance, like Gina Reinhardt is very much into Australian businesses and agriculture outside of her mining entities. Twiggy Forrest is the same with his business. And some of the tech guys, they all like tech. So they invest in tech, like Stephen Baxter and so forth like that. So having and knowing what you want to do, what you want to get from a family office is key. And most of them all have websites, so you can go and find it, or you can scrape LinkedIn and find them on there, or you can there's other websites out there as well that have the data on. I just can't think of them at this point in time. Now, if you have had success and you want to set up your own family office, well, then that's different. So if you say you've had success, you sold a business, you got 15 million, 10, 15 million dollars for that, and you want to make sure that that money's going to, last for 10 generations or however you want to structure it, well, then you set up a structure that holds the wealth. You then employ people, whether it be through multifamily offices or law firms, accounting firms, and so on, to invest that money. But not just invest that money, but put the family charter together, the vision, the mission that you want to see for the family going forward, how you want to teach your children about money and working in businesses, what they can access with that money. So if you take my family, is everything went into a foundation and can't be touched by anyone else, even me. Right. So I've had to do everything. I've got, education, I've got help and got talk, but I've had to build a lot of stuff myself. Had failures, had success, that's on me. So the family wealth is in a foundation that is for future generations, and it has its causes, and it goes and does those causes. Other family offices, if you take the Vanderbilts, for instance, the Vanderbilts distributed the wealth from generation to generation to generation to generation. So it started with 1, 2 people at the top. It's now with 300 different people at the bottom. So their wealth is, 1/300th of what it could have been. But then you take the Rockefellers, who put it all into a trust and said the capital cannot be touched and the capital needs to increase by X amount. And out of that X amount, we give X amount to our charity, which is a tax deduction, but it also then goes and does the charitable means. But then the working portion of the wealth is then managed through the family office to help individual family members have jobs in the family. So they retain businesses but you get to work in the family, you get a salary, and then you get but you can't touch the underlying initial endowment. Most people have probably heard of the Harvard University and Yale University endowments. These are 60, 70, $100 billion endowments, and they work the same way. So they get given gifts, and most of the time those gifts go into an endowment. The endowment, which is a capital preservation, it never changes. The capital can only increase, and then the university can only ever use the income generated from that capital. That's what you want to achieve through your family office. You want to make sure that your wealth never gets distributed like the Vanderbilts. It only multiplies the same as the Rockefellers.
Yeah, awesome. Love it, mate. Very, very powerful, right? For people out there going, okay, if I want to build something for the future, and then also to reach out to them, right? Like,
Yep.
there if you're wanting the investment and both of those sides. One thing that's come to mind now, I think is a really powerful topic that I'd love to know your thoughts on, is about shareholders agreements.
Yep.
I think this is a big one, right? Because I remember interviewing Christina Carlson from Kiki K, and basically the private equity just sold her business during COVID, and she didn't have any say on it, right? And all right, they own the majority of the company, whatever happens. Now, I guess let's say, maybe there's a couple of co-founders, maybe you're getting investment in, initially, and you still have majority between, the co-founders, right, of the
Yeah.
business, but there's other people that are in there. What are your thoughts on like what's important in the shareholders agreement, or things that we should watch out for, or make sure we include stuff like that to make sure that we're in the best possible position for minimal
Yeah.
challenges, going down the line?
So the number one thing is to have a shareholders agreement. The amount of times that I've gone into businesses and we're looking at them, or I'm trying to help them, or we're trying to restructure them, or whatever, and I go, "Where's your shareholders agreement?" And they look at me as if I've got two heads. So the number one thing is if there is two or more people, even if it's your brother, mother, sister, spouse, have a shareholders agreement in place that outlines how the business is run, right? Who's doing what, how, and all that jazz. How dividends are going to be distributed. Is there going to be charitable giving from the business? Is the company being grown for lifestyle, or is it being grown for to be sold? Right. You can even include those sort of things in your shareholders agreement. The next thing is make sure you update them at any major change of the business's life cycle. You hit a milestone, 10 million revenue, or you expanded into 3 different locations, or whatever it is. Make sure that the shareholders agreement reflects the period where the business is at. Now, from bringing in equity into the business, they're definitely going to want a shareholders agreement. Depending on how sharky the firm is that you've gone with, they will definitely have things in there like anti-dilution rights on their portion. Try and stick away from those sort of things. Have things like tag along and drag along rights in your shareholders agreement, which means that if say super majority of the votes, say 75% of the votes, say that that we're going to sell the business, and 25%, or say yeah, 25% didn't want to do that, well, they get automatically dragged along, right? So whatever decision's made, because I've seen it where if you're relying on the Corporations Act and you have a shareholders dispute, a minor shareholder at 5%, for instance, can then take, if there's 20 other shareholders, it really does matter if there's a group of shareholders in the business, can then take them and say, well, I was a suppressed minority and, they didn't give me. So you need to make sure that you are covering all the bases. If there's two of you, 50%, 50%, well, how does that work if there's a tie? Is there a third person? I structure boards with 3 people. The chairman doesn't have a vote normally, but it has the casting vote on it. And the chairman can be an executive of the business, or can be literally just a director with no shareholding, right? So they're sort of a guiding mentor to the founders and that sort of stuff. Private equity coming in, if they're decent, they will want a seat on your board. They will want to say to some degree of how the business is run. So with that, what the management does, what the board does, have that spelled out in the shareholders agreement. Make it clear who does what. So,
Yeah, amazing. Really, really powerful on that, the power, right, of the shareholders
yeah.
agreement. And am I right in saying, like, let's say, we're doing it's a newer business, we're getting a big investment in, and we're going like maybe for an exit strategy in like 5 years, right? Which is pretty standard. Could we be putting things in there like, hey, you can't sell out before a period of time? Because if
Yeah.
you've got people that are minor shareholders, it's not like you're gonna impact the vision, right? If you're trying to pull out earlier. Yeah.
If you're say you're starting up, you've been going for 18 months, 2 years. You've gone through what we call the friends, families, fools ranges, which invested around. So you brought a group of smaller shareholders in. They've put 10, 20, 50 grand in, 100 grand in to get you going. Now you're bringing in your first big investment, $50,000. What I would actually do is I wouldn't bring them in as direct equity, right? Because you're probably going to leave too much on the table. I would probably bring them in under a convertible note, meaning it's a debt instrument that can be converted to shares in specific situations. So, for instance, it could be a time-based. In 2 years' time, if the business has met XYZ, it can be converted to shares of the company at this formula. Or it could be that the debt's just paid out. They may then get a 2% tag along free carry for helping the business get through. So you don't actually lose too much equity up front. A lot of startup businesses lose too much equity going forward. The other thing that I see some businesses make the mistake of is they list their business on an exchange, so the Australian Stock Exchange, and they don't allow enough shares for equity, private equity, institutional investors to actually get on the cap table. So they might list the bare minimum 20%, when really what they should be listing is 50 or 60% of the company, right? To allow that flood of institutional money into the business. So you don't want to give away too much equity in the early days, but you don't want to choke the business with not allowing enough equity in for it to grow and to mature as well. So it's finding that balance.
Yeah, definitely. Love it, mate. That very, very powerful. I love these conversations because a lot of people aren't thinking about these things, right? Because
Yeah,
it's always in hindsight, right? Oh crap, I wish this was in the agreement, or wish I
yeah,
did this. And you gotta, you learn a lot from failure, right? Or from people that know about these things. So I think it's really powerful. So everybody definitely have a shareholders agreement, or make sure you
yeah,
check it and update it, like Stephen's been talking about, if needed, so that you're in a good position for
yeah.
whatever the
And
situation.
don't make the mistake that I've made before and get kicked out of your own company. So
That's it. So,
yeah.
and what is it? Is that just like, obviously, if you're a director, you've got a role and things like that. Does that become part of it? Is that just because of shareholdings that they kick you out, or is there other ways?
Got kicked off the board. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So the board voted with so um, the shareholding was complicated. We had 40 odd shareholders in the business. No one really had a large share. The largest shareholder was myself at about 8-9%. Everyone else had all these really small amounts. And basically, we had too big a board, and the board numbers just went against me. People that I thought were on my side weren't on my side at the end of the day. And that's where it comes back to relationship building. Make sure that you keep control of, if you've got a board with outside people on, make sure you've got a good relationship with them. You know, I've been involved in companies, and I'm involved in one at the moment where there is a big breakdown in the board. And you got board members that won't talk to each other, and they've basically got lawyers at 10 paces. So
yeah,
yeah,
crazy. So yeah, make sure you know what you're doing, and yeah,
yeah,
with all of that, and don't have too many people in the board. I think that's the key
yeah,
takeaway, right?
yeah.
Have enough, but not too many, because
So,
then that
yeah,
complicates it, right? In that area
yeah,
there.
yeah.
So
I can always remember the Hong Kong company. It was a listed Hong Kong company. Me and another guy, we come in to advise the board, and we've come to the board meeting where we're going to give some advice or a presentation after their board meeting, and we're sitting there, and there's like 30 odd people in the room, and I was sitting talking to the chairman, going, um, uh, "Have you got extra members that you want us to give?" He goes, "No, no, no, that's the entire board." We're just looking at it, and there's 30 odd people on the board. It's like I don't know how they ever got anything done. Uh, so
yeah,
yeah,
interesting times. Well, that's all right. Learn from it, and yeah, get it right the
definitely.
first time. So love it, mate. And yeah, you share so much gold with us here today, mate. With everything on internationalization, M&A, private equity, family offices, shareholders agreements, all of that, extremely so powerful. And I guess as we're starting to wrap up here today, what one key piece of advice would you like to give to all the entrepreneurs watching and listening today?
So one of the biggest things is just go for it. Go for it. At the end of the day, you'll probably be disappointed by what you didn't do than what you do, even if it means failure. I've been involved in a couple of spectacular failures over my career, and you've just got to brush yourself off and keep going. It's tough, but it's just keep going. put it this way, if you're an entrepreneur, you're in the top 5% of the population. 85% of the population don't want to do what you're doing. Right. And so just keep doing it. Yeah. And keep going. And build a good network.
Yeah, love it. Completely agree. Right. It's like get up more times than you get down, basically, right? As
Yep.
long as you keep going, you'll succeed in the end. And
Exactly. Yeah.
learn from it. So yeah, awesome, mate. Very, very powerful. And yeah, we connected through our networks. I learned about your awesome
Yep.
journey from being in the Navy to now, providing internationalization strategies, family offices,
Yep.
I know with individuals, global investors, and even making tiny homes, that I know
Yep.
you're doing as well in the sustainable housing space, which is amazing too. Awesome guy, mate. So knowledgeable. You shared a lot of gold with us, here today, on what we want, take our wealth and our, life to the next level. And I'm sure we continue to help families and businesses in wealth, optimization, protection, and all the business services that you provide. And very grateful that we connected, mate, in person as well as obviously on the podcast here today, and look forward to partnering at some point as well in the future.
Definitely.
So, Stephen, how can people, find you and get in contact with you?
Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn at just Stephen Petith. Or you can find me at stephenpetith.com, my personal website. My business website is globalprivatepartners.com, and you can reach out to me at stephen@globalprivatepartners.com. So
Amazing.
that's it.
Yeah, definitely check out Stephen and all those, the website, the socials, the email, all of that, right? And I'm sure he can help you in different ways depending on where you want to go, in your life, in your business, and your wealth, on that side, mate. So, mate, it's been a pleasure interviewing you, and thanks for being on the Business
Excellent.
Growth Show.
No, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Business Growth Show, where we talk about everything on business growth. And please like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as Athin Cassiotis, or visit my website, athincassiotis.com. And if you want to grow and scale your business, you'd reach out to me on any platform to see if we're a good fit. So until next time, remember that our business grows where we learn skills and take action using them in spite of fear. So let's create wealth and freedom together.